Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. Oh, they can't believe that.
Good time of day, everyone. This is episode 165 of Americans Watching the Footy, our 2024 Round 7 recap. I am Benjamin Castle here alongside my brother Ethan, actually, well, really in between him and his son, Brian Harambe, who is fascinated by the shadows on the wall. A 9-game round over 5 days with no overlaps is now in the books. And let's see how much we remember from the early parts, Ethan. 5 days of footy, is that the game that kids really liked? That one didn't land, I'm sorry. All right, common themes, other than complaints about umpiring, that's like just a theme every round. I don't really have much else in terms of common themes. Weird expected score stat. I mean, there weren't any crazy expected score outcomes in terms of like flipping the results of games. I mean, except for one obvious one. Well, we'll see. We got a lot to get into. Richmond 5-12-42 defeated by Melbourne 13-7-85. Cracking Wednesday night game at the G. Terrible second quarter. First quarter was not high scoring, but fun. Second was just awful, and I think it was Stephen May, either him or Trent Rivers after. One of Melbourne's defenders apologized to the fans because it was so bad, and then they pulled away. Daniel Turner is a forward, I guess, and kicked 3 goals. Where the hell did that come from? Looking back at his performances for the KC Demons, I saw that his last time out against Port Melbourne, he had kicked a goal, and I guess that one game and that goal was enough to convince him that, yeah, he could do this at the top level. And now it kind of begs questions about some more of their forward structure, with Harrison Petty having been quiet for a couple weeks, and Shane McAdam potentially getting in quite soon, if not this next round against the Blues. There's a lot left to be decided about the look in the forward 50. They didn't have Ben Brown for this game either. Yeah, and I think this is the sort of performance that can help them avoid another Weeda Brown situation. I still think of Weeda Brown as two talls kind of going back and forth with no clear definition about it. I mean, I guess you'd classify Daniel Turner as that other tall. Just did not expect him to be in this sort of forward conversation. By the way, love the ironic nicknames like Disco for someone who's got, by his own admission, 2 left feet. Well, I guess DJ would make sense because, turn tables. Too many DJs around, though. I like this. There was another DJ who was prominent a day later. Oh, yeah, I guess so. Anyway, big story of this game. Max Gaughan outplayed Kobe Nankervis and ended up winning the Frank Checker Hughes medal as best on ground, which I think was deserved. Outplayed him as well as Sam Naismith. Didn't really object that much to Naismith, but I think there are more players who should still be ahead of him for the sake of versatility. I'm really thinking of Jacob Kazitsky in that regard. Could tell that Richmond were missing Jaden Short with his calf injury and that they weren't able to get out of the defensive 50 as cleanly a lot of the time. I thought defensively, the biggest reason Melbourne held him to 42, they kind of have term that I just made up, defensive harmony, with Stephen May patrolling the back and then Jake Lever kind of getting out to the edge of the defensive 50 and then further up the ground. I thought this was probably the best game I've seen from Lever so far this year. There are some teams that have that sort of defensive harmony. The Demons have found it again after maybe some issues in the later goings the past couple years. I could definitely say that some other teams are still struggling to find that this year. And not just the teams in the bottom 6. The way I also look at this, I think this game also is kind of evidence, as poorly as it went for Richmond, that it is almost impossible to have the entire team play poorly because, if you have 22, 23 guys, there are going to be some bright spots, and they had a few. I thought Liam Baker was good throughout. Shea Bolton was his usual self, even without quite as many wow factor plays. I mean, you could say Baker was his usual self in that respect too. Baker, Bolton. I'd put Nick Flosstone in that category as well. I don't think he's gotten enough credit this year. He's been like, honestly, all Australian caliber. And I'm just imagining like, when I feel like he's going to be Richmond lifer, but what if he's like, I want to go win another flag before I'm done. I want to be teammates with Tom Stewart. Wouldn't that be cool? You can dream, Ethan and Harold.
I can dream, Harold!
Thompson Dow, honestly, that's 2 straight good weeks from him. Honestly, for a lot of the game, Richmond actually had the better midfield. Melbourne was just better in both 50s. Marlon Pickett did a good job, actually. He tagged pretty well. Did get a little heated at one moment and got a fine for striking Clayton Oliver. If he had hit him like 6 inches lower, it would have been a suspension. I'm just wondering, though, with the Demons struggling in the middle, how concerned do we need to be about that with Richmond missing some pieces in the middle, especially after Jacob Hopper going down, and the kind of opponents they have on the horizon with the Cats and then a quick turnaround to the Blues? I think it's more of a concern if they don't have it figured out by round 9. Geelong is another one of those teams where the midfield just has to be good enough. But if you can't body up to the Blues, say hello to another 39 disposal 3-vote game from Patrick Cripps. How do you do like a sort of one-on-one there? Who do you match up on bounces in that one? This would be a good question to ask Jeff White, the former Port player. He's had a center bounce analysis on Twitter recently. Again, so you're asking like, who does Melbourne match up with, like Walsh and Cripps? That's a good question. Yeah. Despite his turnovers, I actually really like this game out of Hugo Ralphsmith. 21 disposals, 11 contested, got on the run a lot. Thanks for dodging my question. Yeah, I don't have an answer, really. I mean, it's some combination of Petrarca and Oliver, obviously. Okay, no love for Jack Viney. I guess, yeah, Viney's been a little quiet lately, but yeah, I guess maybe you go Viney to Walsh? Or are you thinking then Oliver to Cripps and let Petrarca go free a bit? I don't know. I think with Petrarca's forward abilities, having him being the looser player, if possible, or just the extra to a contest makes sense. If Oliver can go head-to-head against Cripps physically, if he's in good enough condition for that, I think Melbourne could really get things right over the next couple of weeks. Yes, I acknowledge the good game out of Ralphsmith as well as Thompson Down. Then Tom Brown continues to be a really nice field kick, and I think that's another bright spot that a lot of Tigers fans are noticing, and other neutral fans will come around to it over the next couple of years. Morris Rioli Jr. was pretty good. I thought he got the polished turd in this game. 2-2, 14 disposals, 7 marks. Didn't have as many of the tackles where he just like flew in and stuck a dude, but I liked his performance. The past 2 years, we saw how high his ceiling and how low his floor were all in one. I think, would you say he's raised his floor a bit over the summer? Yes, definitely. Because we knew what he could do when he was really on it, and he's been on it for the better part of this season, and in a team that hasn't been, or other pieces that might take away attention haven't been as healthy, then more of the spotlight has been on Morris for positive reasons. I just want to revisit one thing about this game before we move on. I got really bored during the second quarter and just kind of let my mind wander, and then I started thinking about Yobagoya and couldn't stop laughing. Okay, do Australians know the league? If you haven't watched a show called The League, watch it. People told me to for years, and it was the greatest decision I've ever made. Considering how obsessed with fantasy sports people are in Australia, I mean, you don't even have to know fantasy sports to like this show is the best part. It's kind of just like the vehicle for everything. I mean, knowing who Antonio Gates is, for example, will definitely help you like understand things a bit better. But it's like you can still enjoy Deadpool without enjoying other superhero stuff. Like there's some reference to Wolverine and I didn't understand it and I still enjoyed the movie. I guess one other thing to quickly mention, weird to see Jacob Hopper stay on the ground and try to work through the hamstring injury instead of an immediate assessment. Some people, myself included, saw that as just a question mark for the Richmond training staff and physios, considering also what happened with their failure to assess Judson Clark's ACL in the twos. As an Eagles fan, it's nice to have the attention on some other training staff rather than West Coast. But I hope this isn't a trend. Something to note, though. Essendon, 12-13-85. Drew with Collingwood, 12-13-85. We have our first draw of the year. And we have exclusive audio from the team rooms following the games. This is the sort of content you can only get here on Americans Watching the Footy.
Hey! It's a draw! Both the teams are even. They scored the points, and now we're bound for hope, for goal.
Cracking game at the MCG, just slightly smaller crowd than last year. Still the 4th largest home and away crowd ever, and the largest for an Essendon home and away crowd ever. Technically, because, I mean, there have been other games involving Essendon, but this was an Essendon home game officially. I don't think that moves the needle all that much, but it is a cool fact. This game kept its pace in the 4th quarter. It was amazing just how quickly things ended. Last goal came with over 13 minutes left, and that definitely helps. I went back and watched the 4th quarter of this game like 3 times, including watching it live, just to try to understand what the fuck happened. In part, but also just like, even when I was fully awake, it felt like 1 second the clock's at like, a little under 9 minutes left, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh shit, there's 3 minutes left. Like, no matter how many times you watch it, it felt like it went very quickly. I think the draw was the appropriate outcome here. Should the draw stay? Yes, I hate that this discussion gets brought up after every fucking draw. As I've said, I think it's fun because it's so rare. If it happened like as frequently as it does in soccer, that would suck. Losers! But because it happens like 2 to 3 times a year, it's fun. I'm just glad that it's the same point value as all the other games, which is a problem that some sports like ice hockey, which we're watching in the background like right now, really have in the regular season. No leagues in Europe really have this problem, but in North America, regardless of whether or not a game goes to overtime and the loser gets a bonus point, the winner gets 2 points. And it can really mess things up, and this year in particular, it meant that a really undeserving team made the playoffs. The Detroit Red Wings should be in over the Washington Capitals, who have already been eliminated. Yeah, I think the NHL, it should be 3 points for a regulation win, 0 for a regulation loss. That's how it is pretty much everywhere else. The Olympics even does it. And then 2 for an OT win and 1 for an OT loss. The fact that games don't have the same value fucks up so much. And I'm glad that they don't have that problem in Australian football. And I'm glad that the draw is rare enough that it's a real treat when we actually get it. And it should be appreciated, especially in a game like this where, yeah, it does seem appropriate. There were stretches where both teams were very strong. Essendon jumped out with the first 4 goals of the game in just over 4 minutes. Yeah, 4 inside 50s, 4 goals by the time Collingwood had 4 disposals. And then Collingwood, despite inaccuracy, worked into just a 1-point margin by halftime. And it was even from there. I didn't see any one play or sequence of thought, oh yeah, this team deserved to win over the other. Had Kyle Langford kicked that goal, I imagine that all of us would have thought differently. This is actually the second Anzac Day draw. The first one was 1995. Yep, the inaugural Anzac Day. Here's my thing. Like, for every Kyle Langford miss, there was Jamie Elliott dropping a mark. Jamie Elliott also had the mark of the year so far. Like, we haven't checked on the nominees yet for mark and goal of the year, but I can tell you that'll be one of them, and that's the obvious winner, and it should get like 98% of the vote. And not just because it's Collingwood. No, it was awesome. He turned Ben Mackay into a very expensive ladder. I can only imagine how much joy North fans got out of seeing that. I liked that Ben was able to laugh about it. It was also funny that, like, at one point he was talking to himself. Oh yeah, he posted under his Harry burner. Yeah. It's pretty amazing that, he played 2 games at the G in front of like a combined, 190,000-ish, and came away with 2 points. That's definitely the most people that have ever watched one person play footy in a weekend. If only Waverley Park had been built to its full extent. After looking at like Narendra Modi Stadium, God, I wish we had that. Like, I also, because, like the Tebow Chronicles parallel, the Rogers Centre seats 630,000 people. Now, we've yet to see them go bound for street in Ahmedabad. That would be fun. One day. So I think the most interesting discussion out of this game was less about who should have won. Because again, I think things even out. I think this was very much an appropriate draw. Unlike, Geelong Sydney last year, where it was like, we were lucky to come out with 2 points and the Swans really pissed away their chances. I know what the debate was because we had a really hard time to go for it. Who the fuck was best on ground? Neither of us think that it's Zach Merritt. And I don't think Ryan does either, as he tries to fight my shadow on the closet door. Hello, silly. I went with Jake Stringer. Yes, he kicked 1-3 and was a little below 70% efficiency. And 19 disposals isn't that impressive, but then you see that 15 of them were contested. He was just like in there getting dirty all night. I couldn't shake the feeling still that he very much had an almost game on his 30th birthday. I believe he now has the record for most AFL games played on his birthday. I kind of lucked out there in that regard. I ended up going with Andrew McGrath, who was the cleanest mover out of the back the whole game and had a fair amount of positive sequences in terms of transitioning from defense to offense pretty quickly. A 31 disposal, 8 mark day for him. Good luck trying to make a top 5 out of this game because we had a tough enough time. I definitely didn't see it as Merritt. Not that I thought he was bad. I just thought other guys were better. I just thought Merritt was like, he was just kind of there. He wasn't involved for sure. 10 score involvements led the way. I just think his impact was a bit more restricted to the middle third. Whereas Nick Martin had more of a say over the fuller length of the ground, and his being moved to the forward third in the fourth quarter was a very smart one by Brad Scott that I wish had paid more dividends for them. I had said I was not a huge fan of Nick Martin's 44 disposal game. I can't even remember which game it was because it was just Saints game in round 3. It wasn't anything special. This, I thought he was really good and just impacted the game all over. So I liked him. Thought Andrew McGrath was good. I mean, he's had other games with similar numbers, but I thought like his possessions actually shaped some of the attack going forward. It's funny, on my first watch, I thought Scott Pendlebury might have been best on ground. I liked his accuracy on long kicks. And then when I watched it again, he really didn't stand out. And it was more Nick Dacos. And I think, for a guy who isn't usually in that many physical contests, he did get into a couple. He was just shaping his kicks well all over the ground and just showed off some really good vision in this game where I think you see what people like about him most of all, just he reads the field so well and combines that with good kicking accuracy. So any last thoughts on this one? The right team won, and that was no team. Again, both teams, I just think the number of should-have plays and like bad mistakes and stuff evened out. Yes, thank you. So how about we have an even-up ball game? Greater Western Sydney Giants, 17-11-113, defeated the Brisbane Lions, 8-11-59. It was a 61-15 second half, including a 32-2 third quarter. Cracking game at Manica Oval. This is the second game that you've described as cracking this round. Actually, it's the third. Oh, wait, this is the theme. Have you been doing this every single time? I'm just doing that for tonight. I noticed, like, on the pregame coverage and stuff, how much they've said it. And so I'm just kind of, I'm just going to try to kind of embrace their culture. I'm sorry, all I'm thinking of now is...
cracking toast, Gromit.
So I was thinking more smashing. This game was an interesting lesson in how expected score isn't always accurate. So at halftime, the Giants led 52-44 off of a Jesse Hogan goal at the siren. Or, well, I guess technically after. The expected score was in favor of Brisbane, 49-27. And I thought the Giants should have been in front. Maybe not by a ton. I mean, they did hit some pretty lengthy shots throughout the night. But I thought they had been the better team, other than a couple moments in the early stages of the second quarter where the Lions had pulled ahead. Yeah, kicked 3 in a row, I believe, to do that. They kicked 3-4 as part of a 22-0 run, sandwiched around the end of the first and the start of the second. Then the Giants took back the lead. I thought they had outplayed them. I thought the halftime score was appropriate. In the third quarter, they really poured it on. And it's funny that the expected score for the game ended up 82.6 to 68.2. So in expected score, the Giants won the second half 55-19. And in actual score, they won the second half 61-15. Relative accuracy there. I think I completely understand where expected score comes from. I mean, this is... And I can make a case for it being useful most of the time. I mean, of course, this is a stat that purely looks at shots on goal. So, of course, the actual flow of play might go against X score just because of maybe it's a lot of quick entries and shots over a very small stretch of time that really skew things, as it was for the Brisbane Lions, where the Giants had the better body of work throughout the game. I think that's something that's pretty understandable there. The other thing I found interesting when watching this game was how Greater Western Sydney utilized their various half boards, because you had no Tony Green from suspension. Brent Daniels was the sub and remained unused. We're already up to 2 unused subs this year, a few games into round 7. We had, I think, a total of 4 last year, including finals. So maybe we're on a watch for more unused subs this year. Who knows there? I thought it was a weird sub choice considering... Yeah, they kind of ended up looking to only use him if necessary, because he said he'd had some injury concerns during the week. So it's like, why not just... Yeah, it was knee soreness. I think in that case, like, I know it didn't end up mattering, obviously, but why not just rest him altogether? Or just I mean, you did have somebody like Toby McMullen who you could have pulled up from the reserves as well. It was a curious choice. I guess they were thinking he's the best option to take on that Toby Green role higher up and into some forward pockets if necessary. But was him at less than 100% a better option than Toby McMullen at full health? Or playing Harvey Thomas deeper? Or what about instead of another forward, I would have just gone with Nick Haynes. He still hasn't played since his daughter was born, yeah? I guess. Speaking of Darcy Jones, hello. We've been expecting you and your amazing helmet. I love this helmet. If you're going to wear the helmet, you can't just have the boring black one like Caleb Daniel or Tristan Jerry. You got to get the team colors on it. If you want to encourage more players to wear them, this is how you do it. Make them look cool. Linus Brayshaw's was team colored. Imagine if Peter Cech had specially colored ones for all of his different... Oh, that would have been awesome. Exactly, yes. Of course, Jones didn't get attention for the helmet. He got the attention for just breaking through lines all over the field and having a damn strong 2-goal debut. GWS is going to be faced with some difficult lineup decisions in the coming weeks. Honestly, just managing Brent Daniels would help solve some of it in the short term, but I mean, they did. Yeah, if I had to pick who comes out for now, I think the most expendable guys, with how well Harry Perryman played, I would think Lockie Ash is kind of expendable, and then I think Jacob Ware he's just been okay. I mean, it's nice that nobody's tried to kill him like last year. I wasn't trying to make a rhyme, but I just kept thinking, Ware's been there. He hasn't done anything objectionable, but he hasn't really elevated his game to a sense like I hope he would. I'm glad that he's found a bit more of a spot on the wing, but you could slide Ash or his fellow Lockie in Whitfield up there and make room for somebody else to come back in. Good problem to have, though. I mean, because the fact that this team, nobody has done anything to merit deselection. Yeah. And yet they're going to have to find some ways, to make room for Toby Green. Maybe, there are a couple other guys you could manage, but I thought Xavier O'Halloran was heading in that direction, and I thought he played a pretty good game. X gave it to him. Maybe the best goal song choice. This team has a lot of good goal songs. El Sonidito for Callum Brown, which we heard 3 times. Feel this moment for Jake Riccardi, do the emoji pop. We hear that 3 times as well? Think so. I'm amazed at just how many pure long kicks they have on this team. We knew about it from Callum Brown before a lot of the analysts actually did, but Riccardi has elevated his game so much in the past year and change. Aaron Cadman is getting into some deeper spots, and at the end of some handball sequences, he's actually kicked a goal in every game. When the Cats lost to the Giants last year, it was really? We're getting beat by Jake Riccardi? And since then, he's just kind of been yeah, I'm that dude. One of many dudes on a team that is going to have to take out some dudes.
What's better than this? Guys being dudes.
I actually thought best player in this game was probably Finn Callahan. This is another one where I think I saw it coming before a lot of the Victorian-based analysts. He already may be the best left-footed kick in the league. 32 disposals at 614 meters gained. It was the smart decisions to pull kicks laterally that I really saw mess up Brisbane, because he had defenders rushing back to cover. He spotted the more optimal areas, maybe the less contested areas, and was able to help keep control of the tempo throughout this game. And I like that he's been opened up to play a freer game with guys like Ware and Thomas taking wing spots, where Callahan really started on the wing a lot in 2023 before having some license to go further downfield and inside as the season went on when he was healthy. He had some Achilles complaints last year that thankfully look to be behind him as of now. I want to finish off the Callum Brown discussion real quick. He's a forward. I think back to a couple years ago when he was playing against Hawthorn, and it was a wet night and he kicked 4 goals. And it wasn't so much that he kicked any especially long ones. I just remember him soccering in 1 or 2 off the ground that really impressed me. Tremendous ball control. I do remember his set shot kicking was good that night, but it wasn't whoa, he's hitting these crazy long shots. But I always forget. He's Irish, right? I believe he's from Northern Ireland, County Derry. Okay, because the thing is, I think that does answer the question that he could win on a rainy Wednesday night at Stoke. I thought GWS's movement from the back was really good. Callahan, Perryman, Darcy Jones fitting into the Orange Tsunami and being that proper accelerator right away. And remember, they're still without Canelio as well, right? Yeah. It's Do you take Callum Ward out when he gets back? I don't know. I think Ward did a great job getting under Lachie Neal's skin. Maybe there was something brewing from that game last year in Canberra where I think Ward got suspended for something he did to Neal. So my one other GWS observation is, I know a lot of people have been high on Lachie Whitfield because he's had a ton of the ball every week. I think he's just one or two bad turnovers away from being really, really good. And then we'll give him the sort of credit that some others have. So Lachie Neal getting unraveled kind of reflects on the entire team. We know that he can be an agitator in himself, but usually he reels himself in, regains his cool, and is a clean mover of the ball and a successful player throughout the game. Sure, he did have 21 at 7 clearances, but he was not the prime player in the midfield throughout the game, whether on the inside, that being Tom Green, or further out, where Callahan had his moments, and for the Lions, we gave Hugh McCluggage the polished turd. As Neal goes in terms of temperament, so go the Brisbane Lions. And that's the case not just in the midfield, but into both 50s as well. The defense got rattled. They gave up a lot of turnovers. I didn't think they kept their structure all that well. Harris Andrews had a decent enough game. Jack Payne was all right in his one-on-ones. I'm glad that he's stayed in. He was definitely better than last week. Not that he could have been much worse. I still don't think, though, that they've found the right mix. They have the talent, which is what makes this so frustrating. I don't think they found the right mix really anywhere on the field, as crazy as that sounds. It's nice that they are usually another case where they have so many players available to them that it's difficult for them to make those decisions. With two players who you'd think would slot into the best 18 right away coming back soon in Tom Duday and Will Ashcroft, this is going to be another really interesting one to watch, just how the Lions decide to actually structure each third of the oval, because they haven't figured it out yet, even with a mix in there that on paper ought to be close to undefeated. I have a few thoughts. First off, don't get into like a Weedham Brown situation with bringing Connor McKenna in and out. They brought him in for Jared Lyons and he wasn't very good. This was his first game back from that hamstring injury, I believe. Maybe needed a week to get back up to AFL speed. I would back him in. I've been a very outspoken Connor McKenna enjoyer from the beginning since 2020. This is a talented team right now. They still absolutely have the talent to play with and beat anybody. This is not a good team right now. And I want to point to those sequences, especially at the end of the third quarter, which was just awful. They basically just let the Giants go down the left wing and then go end to end with like no pressure at all, to the point that both James Peatling and Harvey Thomas ended up basically just passing up open shots for Jake Riccardi. Just an absence of giving a shit. This was, and I don't like calling teams out for this, this was a team that had given up at that point. And then you tie that into also just like how important Lachie Neal's attitude is. And, it's not like he was a bad player by any stretch. But, remember a couple years ago, I thought, okay, moving Zorko out of the captain role, the whole team's attitude is going to be better. We saw it last year. We're not seeing it now. I think having agitators is good. You need one or two. But you also need guys with like the stability to set the tone and get things right. And right now, that just isn't happening. And I think I advocated for Harris Andrews to be the sole captain. And maybe now you're seeing why. Let Neal focus more on the leaderships. Let Neal focus more on what he can control in terms of his own play on the ground, and have someone who's already an architect of overall team movement have that captaincy role. These next 2 weeks should be pretty much make or break for the Lions, because in theory, they should win the following two after that to get into the bye. If they get into the bye at 6-5, they've got a tough schedule coming out of it. Things are hardly easy. I mean, they've got one of the toughest schedules altogether. But if they win these next two, home Q Clash and then at Adelaide, both of those would buck some significant trends against the Lions. That would then get us to the point, to borrow the John Rothstein term, in position to be in position. Because then you go home against the Tigers and then at Hawthorn, but also it's at Marvel, which we know how good this team is at Marvel. Although, they're 0-3 at the GABA and they have a win at the G. Maybe we're throwing that all out the window. It's just, those are two games, regardless of location, they should win. Just vibes are not good right now. Like, you watch this team, this is not just a group that's down on its luck. You do not get a good feeling from the body language, the effort, the anything out of this team. even when you get to watch Charlie Cameron do something cool, it's like, it only stems a tide for a moment. Port Adelaide 11-16-82 defeated St Kilda 11-6-72. Cracking Friday night game at the Adelaide Oval. I'm disappointed that you noticed before at least the 5th or 6th game. It only took you 3 games to notice. I pick up on language stuff like that really easily. I also picked up on how frustrating Port would be to watch as soon as you had Todd Marshall and Mitch Georgiadis missing some bad set shots. I think Port missed their first 5 set shots en route to a 1-goal 8 first quarter. Here's the funny thing. If you told me by expected score that Port should have won this game by 38, I would have said sure, but I wouldn't have thought it would be because the Saints outperformed theirs by 17. Sorry, you said 17? 38?
I'm like, hey, what's up, hello?
Oh, sorry, I was thinking 17,
17.
17?
17.
But yeah, expected score 92.6 to 54.6. I just thought Port left a lot of points out there, and then the whole tone of this game changed when everyone got hurt. Alir failed a concussion test, so he was off at halftime. Jack Higgins suspended for 3 games for that dangerous tackle. Not your normal dangerous tackle where the guy gets the body. Instead, Higgins just slung him by his arm. Good luck challenging that, Saints. I guess that was before Sam Powell-Pepper did his ACL. My thought going out of this game, even with the win, is Port Adelaide update, fuck. I mean, this team does have some depth, and I thought they got a massive lift in this game because Lachie Jones was good. I thought he was a candidate to get managed or just outright dropped, and he played really well. And then Peter Batko medalist Willem Drew bouncing back from a couple quieter weeks as well. Nothing to say that he shouldn't be in there, but not at the level where we sometimes expect him to be, especially in terms of translating his physical play into positive movement. He and Kane Farrell both had been quieter the last couple of weeks. I think Farrell still has another level he can get back to. I thought Drew was probably 3rd best player here. I thought the 2 best were Zach Butters and Jace Burgoyne. I've liked Burgoyne for a while. I have too. We've seen him put on smart kicks from the halfback flank, but this is another case where I think with the injuries that piled up elsewhere, Ken Hinkley decided to do away with some of the structure and let Burgoyne have more of a job further downfield on the boundaries, and that has worked extremely well. I almost wonder if you could have him in sort of a Jeremy Sharp role where he just patrols the boundaries over the length of the field because he's got good enough endurance to be that sort of runner. Maybe not the finishing ability, but give him more leeway to get out of the back half. Yeah, I like that, but I also like that he can direct play towards the middle instead of with Sharp where everyone gravitates toward the wing. So that's a difference. Yeah, I mean, you've got plenty of capable kicks there in that halfback group between Burgoyne, Kane Farrell, and Danny Houston. You can have a lot of fun things there in terms of who you decide to deploy further inside or outside and when, because all those players can kick the ball 65 meters with ease. And we saw plenty of that through the quarter for Dan Houston. I thought he was a little too turnover prone in this game. That's the risk that you take, though, with those long kicks, so I completely get it. He only got credited for 3 of them. I think probably, a couple of kicks kind of just someone else ended up getting charged with the turnover, but he had something to do with it. I know he was only at 63% efficiency, but I actually really liked this game out of Zach Butters because I thought he was the most consistent performer. And the 4th quarter, he basically had to do everything because by then they had also lost Connor Rosie to a low-grade hamstring strain. Currently would describe him as day to day or week to week. There's a chance that he could get up for the showdown. Going from playing Friday night to Thursday night isn't impossible. Without any sort of intel, I would put him somewhere between doubtful and questionable. But credit to Port for holding on despite things getting pretty rough. That said, I don't think the Saints jumped on the opportunities enough. They didn't try to really just take it through the middle when they needed to. This has been a problem that they had in multiple of their losses. I was all over this after their game against the Dogs. When they could not win in the midfield, they did not have the ability to really accelerate play. You could have all the defensive 50 intercepts you want. Callum Wilkie was our polished turd winner out of this game, and that wasn't really a surprise. This was easily his best game. I had been critical of him in prior weeks, just saying that, he's good, but he's not on that elite tier. He's had two pretty strong games coming back home. The fourth quarter to win it in the Gather Round against Richmond, where he really locked things down. And then this whole game against the Power, he stood out as the best, not just in defense, but overall for the Saints. But once he ends up intercepting, there's no speed on the ball. Even with capable movers like Naziah Waigani-Miller there in the back, even with Jack Sinclair being able to flex back from the wing, I need to see those players get involved more on some overlaps of those second disposals after an intercept, because even though Ross Lyon is their coach, this team needs to speed things up when they get the ball out of defense, and they just don't. And what it means is other teams can speed it up going back the other way and wreak havoc when the Saints weren't prepared to move at that tempo at all. It's frustrating because they have team speed. They only use it when they get the ball in the front half or the center square. Is this a case where you take out one of those defenders that had come in there like Dougal Howard, maybe, and just do something to actively bring Jack Sinclair back into a defined back six role? I don't know. I understand this team very little. I mean, that's just kind of how Ross ball works. As this was also just a quiet game from Seb Ross. I think get him going more and maybe get Mitch Owens more than 11 touches, and good things will come out of it. I mean, Owens, despite only having 11 touches, 7 score involvements. You see why we're so frustrated about this team constantly. Instead of having Sinclair be an accelerator, you have Riley Bonner kick all over the place and have a lot of those kicks come back. And then again, no rebound speed whatsoever from the back third or the back half altogether. I still don't think they're as bad as 2 and 5, but they're not doing themselves any favors, Ethan. Also, credit to Jordan Sweet for not getting absolutely dominated by Rowan Marshall. Marshall was going through some injury concerns. I think it was the outside of the knee. I think that is a watch going into next week as the Saints get set to play. You know what? Yeah, this is a good time to rest Rowan Marshall if needed. North, game on. Jack Hayes. Jack. I mean, Tristan Jerry's also good. At the same time, though, if there's an opponent against whom you would rest people, it would easily be North more than Hawthorn. And they do have the Hawks in round 9, and Lloyd Meek's been playing better. Yeah, but Tristan Jerry's been good too. Anyway, there are opportunities for Marshall to be managed if needed is the point, and we really like Hayes. I think just the biggest takeaway was, from a Saints perspective, is they didn't adjust their game plan when the situation called for it. Ross Lyon teams don't do that in general, and that's the problem. You know, their style gives them a chance against teams with superior talent, but when there are mismatches to exploit, I don't think they do a very good job of it. They are who they are. It's that simple. Also, want to mention Jason Horn-Francis played through some injuries and was pretty quiet first half and got better as the game went on. Was also tagged by Marcus Windhager in the first half, which I think also contributes to the issues that he had. So I'm not sure how much the injuries really factor into that there. Going into the Saturday action, North Melbourne 12-9-81. They have no problems kicking relatively accurately. Can't say that for their fellow bottom feeder. Defeated by Adelaide 20-18-138. This game went about as I expected it would. I don't think we really learned anything new. I don't think there were any crazy revelations here. Rory Laird got back to more center bounce work and to very good effect. He and Jordan Dawson were clearly up there as the two best of this game. Dawson with more of a roving job and a very good one at that. And in defense, I see more and more people praising Josh Worrell. And this is another one where I was on it before the Victorians were. I saw it going back to his second game. This was back in 2022 when they had that surprise round 20 victory at home against the Bulldogs? The Blues. That was a game also where I think Wayne Miller went off. That's right. That's right. Ethan's grinning from, oh yeah. No, I legitimately forgot because we just think of what happened in round 23. But yes, that game we thought at first, this is an aberration. And then we realized, no, it wasn't. But we also saw Worrell show some real one-on-one defensive skill. And I thought from the early part of last year, you could really build a new defensive unit for the Crows around Worrell and Max Michelini. And maybe Dan Curtin if he gets in which I expect to happen in round 3 of 2025 if Curtin does stay back or he does more of a roving job. The point is, Josh Worrell needs to get some more appreciation from the East Coast media, and I think this is the type of game where you could really see why that is. He read one-on-ones really well. He anticipated a lot of North's ball movement, knew when to shift off those matchups. And in the game where Adelaide racked up goals and scores in general, it's nice to be able to shine a little spotlight on a good defensive performance for them. It took me about 6.5 games to give up on North. It took you that long? Look, they're going to win a couple games at some point. They could get away from the spoon, maybe? Yeah, but I have lost interest. It is not just that they are bad. It is that they are also boring. What did they do to hold your attention? George Wardlaw played physical. It took multiple weeks for him to get back into actual midfield action. I don't know why Clarkson moved him to halfback, and I'm glad that he got in there amongst that strong group there of Crows mids and actually did manage to reconvene a havoc. I think it was a more balanced game in general out of Luke Davies-Uniacke, to whom we gave the polished turd, but Wardlaw was clearly second on North. In terms of other structural things, though, they've yet to really let Harry Sheasel free from that halfback spot. We thought got so much ability, and they just stick him in the most boring role. We thought it would finally happen with Riley Hardiman coming in defense, and he had some nice 1% plays early on, and then we just saw Sheasel just keep that halfback spot as if nothing ever happened. A very boring 29 disposals. Just like Colby McKercher's 32 disposals. Just like, okay, it didn't move me at all. And I'm just waiting to see something new in general out of this team. We have not gotten it for just a whole game where it's like, wow, this is something that I didn't think before about North, and it's sticking and it's mattering. They have given up triple digits in every game so far. Maybe it won't happen this coming week. This is a stoppable force against a movable object. Damn it, I thought we were going to save that for the preview. I was thinking that too. Look, coming up at Saints and North round 8, it was the worst game of last year in that exact same round. I would expect it again this year. In hindsight, they didn't play that poorly against the Giants, although it did, kind of expose that, man, it's really easy to just run through these guys. They had a 5-goal lead on Freo early. I guess they played Carlton for a half, but they cannot play a team for 4 quarters. Can they even do it for 3? I just want to have something to get excited about. Even as bad as the Hawks have been, there are individual players that are interesting, if not good. On one end, it's like, is James Sicily going to attack someone with a sledgehammer this week? What's Sam Frost going to do? What's Mabi Archol going to do? And then you actually have some real top talent like Jai Newcomb. Richmond, for all their injuries, still get to watch Shea Bolton. West Coast has players worth watching. All I'm saying is this rebuild better work, because you can't subject people to both bad and boring unless it actually leads to results. And I think there's a lot of apathy right now towards this team. Attendance for this game, did you see what it was? It was in the 4s. No, it looks like it was actually 5,365. Oh, maybe that was revised then. Look, we were thinking maybe would Tasmania getting this game in Anzac Round maybe help boost North's attendance. No, just people don't want to watch bad footy. I think it's also why bother going out for this team when we're going to have our own. Do you think Hawthorn's attendance will also suffer similarly? I don't think it'll suffer as much because they've got a pretty good following down there, but I could see it taking a dent. When do we get to find that out? When do the Hawks go down there? I think that's in 2 weeks' time. Funny, I think you try to get them there early in the year when the weather's good. And especially for North, considering that at least they don't have to worry about bad weather most of the time because they play at Marvel. They traditionally have that Anzac Round fixture. You think about the crazy game they had a couple years ago that also served as Riley Thilthorpe's debut. The Crows started 15 straight and lost 102-99. You think of Anzac Round and the Hawks, and it really surprised me. And they came out flat in their game. And yes, it is going to be in 2 weeks' time when they host the Saints at UTAS. But yes, I'm just unimpressed, unmoved. Rory Laird was good. Elliot Himmelberg was good. We saw mostly good from him. Some clear bad moments early on, too, with a couple giveaways and one-on-one losses. Overall impression though, good, but wondering if he has enough to really stick in the best 22. For now, he's overwalking a bit. Yeah, he's at least earned himself another week. And he did show up in the showdowns last year. This was obviously when we previewed this game, we said This is a must-win for the Crows, and, it kind of went how we expected. I only put this game higher because of, the what if and how funny it would have been. It wasn't funny at all. It wasn't, and I think just the only way I'm going to be compelled with North at all is if they're in some close games, because otherwise, I was pretty tuned out by halftime of this one. Helps that you were looking forward to the game right after it. That had very little to do with it, honestly. Really, wow. I think the good performances by Himmelberg and a couple other players will just add to the intrigue of looking toward Showdown 55 on Thursday. I am so glad we have a standalone primetime showdown this year. And you couple that with how Port's going to select in light of their very prominent injuries, it will be a very intriguing look for both teams going into that one. We did, of course, get some unfortunate news about the Crows shortly before we started this recording. After 255 games and with ongoing concern over his eye injury, Rory Sloane has decided to retire. I did not realize just how consistent of a ball getter he was throughout his career. Swamp posted something where I think it said he was one of just 8 players since full stat tracking began to average 20 disposals and 5 tackles over a 250-plus game career. I'm surprised that this is the sort of injury that could end someone's career, although it was discussed recently on a baseball podcast I listened to that, your body as you age requires more upkeep, and it can get to a point as an older athlete where it's man, is it really worth doing this every week? Because it's a lot more work than it is earlier in your career. And also think about how retina injuries nearly ended Mason Cox's career. Mason isn't super young either, so I completely understood where Sloane was coming from in terms of having to manage this injury in context of an actual work-life balance too. I hope he stays involved with the club because he's clearly a very well-respected figure in the club and the game. And I know that they'll do some good things to honor him over the next couple weeks.
Absolutely, the Crows
fans
were robbed
of seeing Rory Sloane reach 300 games.
right in front of me. Right in front of me.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Welcome back to Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle.
I'm Benjamin Castle.
Find me on Twitter at Castle Media. Find us on Twitter at Americans Footy. Find him on Twitter at BenjaminHK01.
Find Brian Harambe kinda curled up at Ethan's feet and on Instagram at cat named Brian. He has really gotten fascinated by the shadows that I project onto the closet lately. In my room, in Ethan's room, he shadow boxes. Geelong, 18-10-118, defeated Carlton 15-15-105 in front of a Geelong home and away record crowd of 87,775. I think the Cats will really go into campaign to keep Saturday 4:35 as their MCG home time. Is that when you want to see the country game, or do you want to be a bit early?
I'm fine with that being an earlier game. I don't care about the time as long as you win.
Also, wouldn't it being later affect one of your flights?
Yeah, as long as it's not the Thursday nighter.
This is another game where we had a really hard time deciding who was best on. We're not going to give our answers, but there were a couple clear candidates. Jeremy Cameron was the obvious one, with his 5 goals won from 17 disposals at 9 marks.
He also had an assist.
Yes, still playing that full field game, which is incredible considering he's up to 603 goals for his AFL career now.
Also, he's doing it with a partially broken finger, I learned, because he talked about it on his YouTube channel. Great follow. I recommend, no matter who you're a fan of, follow Jeremy Cameron on YouTube.
On Live Watch, he obviously stood out. Going back, though, there was a real case to be made for, and I said it before you, Ethan, Brian Myers.
Yeah, and this is funny because normally I'm the one doing that, but I thought he did a good job, especially playing along the wings. Even though he only had like one actual assist, a lot of score involvements and kicks that set things up, and was just very clean with the ball. Like, the only knock was his tackling wasn't great, and that's never good.
Not great tackling, lost a couple defensive one-on-one contests, but in terms of overall play in the forward two-thirds, a very complete and effective game there.
But yeah, he was one that, like, on rewatch was much better. In real time and on rewatch, Mark Pittonet kicked our asses, and that's 2 weeks in a row. If you look at the quarter and a half that Oscar McInerney played, and with Max gone looming, that is a concern.
Do you go Conway or Stanley?
I think you stick with Stanley because he has more full field ability, but it'll be a lot of blitz obs. Here's what I really liked about this game, other than that Carlton lost.
And Geelong won and are 7-0.
I had said that Jack Henry hadn't really played up to his potential yet. I thought he was terrific in this game. We got a vintage performance out of Zach Toohey, who I would have been hesitant to even include. I love seeing Carlton fans bitch over him tugging at his jersey. You know, that's just awful that someone would do that to their precious Blues.
He's played more games for the Cats now, you twats.
And one lowballed him, you dumb fucks. That's why he left.
It can't be a disrespect to the fans that somebody leaves when they're getting disrespected by the club management in the first place. And I don't think he's said any particularly off remarks about Carlton supporters either. I mean, I get that you constantly boo players who used to play for your team, but this was more than that, and I didn't understand just how persistent this hatred was.
Carlton fans are whiny little bitches, okay? Them and David King and Jason Dunstall were acting like they were getting hosed by the umpires all day. I guess because they won the free kick count 14-10 instead of 40-10.
Wow,
it's the whole team. Oh my God, Zach Williams, complete bitch about this. I thought at first he had hurt his ACL. No, he was just flopping, and I would help pay part of Ollie Henry's fine.
I was surprised they didn't pull the trigger and suspend him because it was against those precious Blues. I think some of the surprise was the calls going one way and not the other. And yes, consistency has been an issue, not just in this game, but throughout the season. And yes, the Cats have had trouble with the free count all year, so that was a nice kind of reversal of the
0-7 in the free kick count.
When they finally win free kicks, do they lose the game?
I don't know. I mean, I thought that would be the case with the coin toss. We're now 6-1 on coin tosses. But yeah, I don't like entitled teams, and Carlton and their fans are entitled as fuck, and beating them just feels great.
I don't want to badmouth an entire fan base.
And they have some very funny and entertaining people. The guys from Blue Abroad are great. Nick Negropontis is really good, but collectively, this is an entitled, whiny, stuck-up little fan base. And I love seeing teams like them, or Michigan, or the Toronto Maple Leafs get what's coming. Especially because, like, look, this is a good Carlton team, even with the guys they were missing. And even with a couple of things like, you know, Matthew always having a surprisingly poor game. This is a good team, and it's rewarding to beat a good team. Also, it was funny just how much, you know, I like Jason Dunstall a lot. I love him on bounce, but he's holy shit tied the bias. My fucking God. I usually think he's a very good play-by-play and color guy, and I thought he was awful in this game.
Did he just kind of buy into the other commentators?
I don't know. It was a mix of bitching about the umpiring nonstop when Carlton's holding guys on every fucking ruck contest. Then that doesn't take away from the fact that Mark Pittonet beat Reece Stanley every way possible. He kicked his ass. It was also the level of excitement on Carlton goals versus Geelong goals was very apparent. And just complaining that Carlton couldn't take advantage of their chances. Like, he did credit Jeremy Cameron. That was good. But that was about it.
And it's not like the Blues were ridiculously... I mean, 15-15 is obviously, you know, it's pretty much the definition of a mixed bag in a high-scoring game.
But they missed some easy ones.
Harry Mackay with a couple.
Rilhan de Koning with a couple. Corey Durden with one. I figured out what it is I don't like about Corey Durden. He looks like this annoying soccer YouTube guy.
What?
Thogden.
I will take a look at...
Now he just... Maybe if Corey Durden starts yelling, look at what it means to them, every 10 seconds, maybe then I'll like him more because he plays into the bit.
You see, I appreciate the role that Durden has actually...
Oh, no, I have nothing against Durden as a player, but there was always just something about him I didn't like, and now I know what that something was.
Yeah, in terms of actual on-field impact, though, I think he's learned how to play off the tolls quite well. It is good for usually a goal or two per game, never a high volume, never a high volume, but has started to pick his spots a bit better. It's going to be tough, though, for him to keep a spot once eventually Jesse Motlop and Jack Martin do make their way back in. There are going to be some very tough forward 50 decisions that the Blues are going to have to make soon.
There were so many guys that you could make a case for deserving votes in this game, like at least coaches' votes. I mean, I think the obvious top 4 players, I think, were some mix of Cameron, Cripps, Myers, Pittenet, but like looking up and down the rosters, Blake Akers was really good and led a late charge. Jack Bowes overcame a shortage in speed to record an octopus. Charlie Curnow is just, like, he's so strong.
Who can guard him?
Gotta give Jake Kolajashny credit for hanging in there and playing a pretty good first half.
Even prime Jeremy McGovern would struggle against current Charlie Curnow.
Also, you know how, like, really buff short dudes look even shorter? Well, Charlie Curnow looks shorter than he is because he's really buff. He's 6'4", but he looks shorter because he's got so much muscle. That's what it is. I finally figured it out.
I would think of him as 6'2".
First quarter, Ollie Dempsey was great on the outside, and then he kind of quieted, but still was valuable. Mitch Duncan, consistent throughout. Patrick Dangerfield, until doing his hamstring again, I thought he was incredible.
How do they manage Dangerfield? Do they do the similar thing that they did in 2022, where they just give him those, like, how long was it, like 9 weeks or so to really get back to full health and really bide his time? Considering you've got those wins banked, you have more of an ability to do that management. This is something you've talked about over and over, how important it is to get these early wins and why, for example, teams like Collingwood and Brisbane and Fremantle might be behind the 8 ball for the whole year because of their inability to manage it the same way.
He will not be playing a game in May. Maybe round 13, June 9th against the Swans right before the bye. I feel good about him being back for round 15 against the Blues June 21st. But, like, again, you can manage these things. And also, you know, we've seen it with the ruck rotation. I think with how well Zach Tuohy played in this game, just playing him every other game or every third game is the move. And Tom Atkins got the memo from being in the sub role. He ended up with only 6 disposals, but 7 tackles, and just in a spot that could have been a really devastating injury. He carried a lot of weight and set the tone really nicely.
Atkins' role has been intriguing for me this year because he spent a lot of time in the back six, spending more and more time off the ball, where I wouldn't peg him into that role at all. I would have always had him in the midfield over Jai Clark. Yes, the message was clearly said, and he was able to make up for Dangerfield absence quite well. Would like to see him get more of the ball, but kind of doing, I almost think of it as like a current Tom Mitchell role at Collingwood, perhaps, with more of a defensive midfield job at his best moments. It's fitting Atkins' skill profile as well as the Geelong list profile at the moment. I do have one criticism of Tom Atkins. Get back the mustache. I had a hard time even recognizing him at first with him clean shaven. It does not look right.
I think this is a game that helps him get back in the middle, and I think it set the tone for Tanner Bruhn to finish the game better. I think Brandon Parfit, who was quiet until that point, really picked up off it.
The sub needs to be a spark plug player.
I know you had thought maybe having him as the sub would, you know, he would just come in for Cam Guthrie, who ended up playing really well. I think easily the best game he's played since the grand final, because I didn't think he had any good games last year.
I think they went into the game being willing to manage Guthrie, and then they found that not necessary, and he's another one who could sneak into some coaches' votes. Both Guthries could.
I thought Zach Guthrie was tremendous at alleviating pressure. Whenever it felt like the walls were about to cave in, he made that next play. Other guys, and I'm just going through alphabetically, Elijah Hollins and George Hewitt were both good. I think Hewitt I appreciated much more on rewatch. Same with Matthew Kennedy. I thought he was really good. 9 tackles, a goal off, 21 disposals.
Kennedy I always describe as just that extra all over the field, particularly in the middle 2/3. And Elijah Hollins, I thought going in, he just spent a lot of time being that second big body midfielder there, but his forward craft has really shown through, and I guess it's allowed Patrick Cripps to just kind of truck through the middle. If Cripps ever needs a spell on the bench or gets sidelined, obviously you can put Elijah in there, but that hasn't been necessary at the moment. What a pickup for the Blues for, oh yeah, absolutely nothing. Because again, the Suns and trades. I like how both teams this game had a clearly very important player that they pretty much got for free from the Suns.
I want to mention one other thing off that I forgot to talk about earlier. You know how the Giants list is so loaded right now? We've joked a lot, and a lot of people have joked about the Giants not being able to keep good players, but God, their ability to identify talent and develop guys is fucking incredible. And we saw, a bunch of former Giants in this game too. And God, if they can retain some of these guys, they're gonna be like a legit dynasty if they can actually retain some of those dudes. But back to this game, Tyson Stengel was really clean as usual. Sam Walsh actually faded in effectiveness as the game went on.
Yeah, a quiet fourth quarter from him where beforehand I was labeling him as potentially getting into top 5 territory, I'd say. Was never sure about top 3, but did not retain that impact. And the fourth, I think that was something that was really missing coming down the stretch, and why Akers ended up having to shift a bit more inside and have more providence in general as Carlton made their ultimately too late run.
One of the bigger reasons Tom Hawkins hasn't scored in 3 weeks. That's a concern. He's been quiet, but Wiedering had a lot to do with it and deserves a lot of credit. He was really good. This was a well-played game, and the difference was one team was clean inside 50 and took advantage of their chances, and the other didn't. And this is a game that last year's Geelong team loses because they can never stop the momentum. So that's where, again, like Zach Guthrie alleviating pressure, Jeremy Cameron coming back with a huge goal really mattered. And I think after looking at this game live and with the rewatch, this is a game that you evaluate very differently in real time and on replay because of like knowing the outcome versus everything happening live, valuing the momentum instead of just looking at each moment as an equally important event.
And the Cats held momentum, got quick responses when they needed to, and the game never got, nail-bitingly close enough to really cause too much concern at the end. I wouldn't say this is a sound the alarm game in any respect for the Blues, considering their outs. However, Walsh not being able to cut for the fourth quarter does raise a bit of a concern going into the kind of stretch they've got coming up over these next few weeks. Collingwood on Friday, then a Thursday against the Demons, at the Swans for the Martin Brook game. You can never slouch all the Suns with that midfield, and Port as well to round out May. This is going to be a sort of spotlight month of May for the Blues.
I'm not as concerned about Walsh because it was his first bad quarter really, and he's played 2-3 games now?
I'm thinking maybe just more of how the Blues want to really manage those minutes earlier on in the game to allow Walsh to have a bit more endurance later on. Again, maybe that's a spot where you try to bring some physicality early by bringing Elijah Hollandsmore into the middle. 14-11-95 defeated the Western Bulldogs 10-11-71. Happy 100th game, Sean Darcy. We expected the Bulldogs to be without Caleb Daniel again, and then he was in as the sub with Tom Liberatoria laid out. No Riley Sanders, though. The perplexing management from the Bulldogs, I guess, continues. And in the end, without Libba, Caleb Sarong and Nat Fife kicked ass from the middle.
I'm not sure if that alone would have won him the game, but it would have. Sarong, 17 clearances, 15 disposals by the end of the first quarter, a lot of handballs, and if he had been better at actually kicking goals, would have been like a historically great game from him. He ended up with 1-1, and I think there were another couple kicks that could have resulted in goals, so it could have been like a 3-goal game from him. But this was like vintage Nat Fife. Combine that with Jordan Clark, very active. I think he's really settled in this year in year 3 with the Dockers. Bailey Banfield, 3 goals, and then the combination of Josh Tracy and Tom Emmett really like marking up and down the field and being involved in sequences, whether it was down the wing or through the corridor. This was a must-win for Freo, and they did a really good job pulling away late from what had been a pretty tight game.
When it comes to those last 3 players you mentioned, I'd said so many times from August, and especially once it was official that Lachie Schultz wanted out, that Banfield and Emmett would have to make up for him in the aggregate. Some Freo fans were calling for Banfield's demotion after kicking no goals for the Western Derby. He made real efforts, though, to get to the ball and get those possessions in that game. I'm glad he got another opportunity, and he made exceptionally well off it. And Emmett loves getting into those more physical spots, knows how to pick those spots very well. I think that's something that maybe mature agers just have more time to really understand before getting to the AFL level. He's great in the pressure game as well. He's been one of my favorites to watch since he debuted in the last couple rounds of 2023. He's also learning at the top level now how to play off of talls like Josh Tracy. And heck, this was without Jai Amos in there, and he still had that sort of game. Pat Voss was the second tall, and he had a nice debut.
He had a nice debut, and I thought Cooper Simpson was solid, but you also had, like, Hayden Young was not special. I mean, he had a decent amount of the ball, but he wasn't anything to write home about. Luke Jackson was held in check, and it was just a bunch of different players standing up. Like Alex Pierce was just kind of there, whereas in the first 3 wins, he had been phenomenal. And it was just like nice to see so many different guys step up to win a game for the Dockers.
This is something that hardly ever happens, meanwhile, for their opponents. And I think it's very fitting that they had this sort of depth win against a top-heavy team like the Bulldogs, for whom we've criticized their lack of kind of understanding of their depth for so long.
I like Matthew Johnson, who I thought would have been an obvious candidate to leave out.
I was expecting him to be dropped after this past game. I'm glad they still got Simpson in. I'm glad the debutants showed well. And I'm also happy that Johnson proved us wrong a bit.
But yeah, Bulldogs, I mean, frankly, Sarong outplayed Marcus Bontempelli. He outplayed him in the middle, but Bont did a good job of getting involved in both 50s to make up for it. And I thought Buku Kamas was really good. And I just hope that the Bulldogs management doesn't look at his 1 or 2 bad kicks or, a rare one-on-one loss and say, that's it, back to Winnipeg.
That's it, back to languishing in the VFL forward line.
Because like the
overall body of work this season from our friend of a friend of the show, Kamas, has been much better. Yes, his mistakes were magnified in this game, but I'd easily put him above, say, Jimmy O'Donnell right now, even though it was a more involved game for O'Donnell with 7 marks.
Harvey Gallagher's been quieter. I would just manage him for a week.
I'm surprised they managed Wiley Sanders before him.
No sense. Rory Lobb was quieter, and the Dockers showed that, hey, if we don't just let this guy live rent-free in our heads, we can beat him.
I think, though, Gallagher might need to take on a more important role, maybe as a smaller forward target. That's something where we're going to see how the Dogs go about that, with Cody Waitman sidelined for at least 6 weeks due to complications from his dislocated elbow. He's had this going on with his elbow at times over the past couple years now.
This could end up being more I think this could be like a 12-week thing.
Well, that was the kind of the ceiling that they said right away. He could miss up to 12 weeks. And how do you make up for his absence when he has that game-breaking ability? And we've seen a decent amount of that this year in their better performances. Do you try Gallagher a bit more into the pocket? Can a man dream for Artie Jones to reemerge?
It's especially funny because Waitman had been the first quarter guy, basically, especially looking at the game against the Suns. And, hey, Freo played a good first quarter. There was a theme from this round. Teams that were known for bad first quarters played good ones. Freo and the Saints. Saints actually played the Saints could have been behind easily, but they still managed.
Looking at the VFL info from the start of this year, it looks like Jones had a down game this past week, but first 3 games of the year scored 6 goals. So maybe there is a chance there for Artie Jones to come back in soon and remind us all why he has such great potential. Remember was it his debut, that Thursday game against the Lions, where he just soaked up everything?
I forget if it was that, but I remember him doing a really good interview after and sending it back to the studio. That I remember.
I want to say look more at the match report this past week and see if there was any reason why he was less involved against the Seagulls. If he's fit to go, I'd love to see him get back in.
Oh, I never looked at VFL scores from this week. Let's see. The Ants lost by 57. Coburg lost by 17 to the Dolphins. Geelong 101-point winners. You really see Carleton has more than enough AFL capable guys, but when you have that many injuries, it takes a toll at the VFL level.
You've really seen that for Collingwood these past couple weeks, losing to Coburg and Essendon. But yeah, I'm going to dive into the Dogs round 4 outing a couple weeks ago against Williamstown just to see, if Artie Jones is all right. And if so, maybe he could be one of the players that helps make up for Waitman's out.
Other observations from this game that I had. I mean, because you didn't see this game live, right?
I saw bits and pieces of it live. Wasn't super analytical about it. That was more doc the replay because Freo have actually won finals in the past 20 years.
James Aish was mostly uncontested, but did well in contests when he needed to. Third quarter, the only reason the Dogs were able to really stay in it, and it hovered around 1 goal for most of the time, was because Liam Jones was just all of a sudden, as Darcy Moore would say, fucking marketing everything. Dockers did a good job keeping Jack McRae in check. I'm not sure who exactly had that role, but I can tell you that they made him less impactful than he had been in his prior couple outings. And then I just thought it was a really frustrating game from Adam Treloar. It just felt like he played before he thought, where he just like would go in and immediately try to handball to someone who was covered, or just, there just wasn't a lot of thought there. And it's funny because I don't think he's a dumb person. I just think he had like zero instincts in this game, and I think it really hurt.
By the way, another potential solution if we're looking at a real long-term out for the Dogs, I think he's just currently on the VFL list, but maybe they could look to elevate Trent Bianco, the former Collingwood player, in the midseason draft, because he's gotten off to a quite nice start in terms of goal kicking for Footscray and the reserves.
This was a must-win for Freo. Dogs get a bit of a reprieve this week with Hawthorn.
Is it a reprieve?
Yeah, this game isn't in Tasmania.
No, in fact, they're not playing in Tasmania for the first time in 3 years. Dockers, meanwhile, get a trip to the G to face Richmond.
And then they got to host the Swans. Then they play the Saints on the road, which that might be the lowest scoring first quarter ever, unless this week was a positive shift. They have a tough stretch of schedule coming up. They also have Collingwood before the and Melbourne before the bye. They needed this one. I think they might have needed it more than the Dogs, who go Hawthorn, Richmond, and then they go to GWS and host Sydney. But the Dogs, my opinion about them hasn't changed. I am looking forward to, and it's a good month and a half away, June 7th, Friday night game, Lions at Dogs. I feel like that could be an eliminator.
I think that's just about as early as you could have an eliminator for potential finals contenders. Let's, you know what? Maybe that's the game where Artie Jones reemerges. Would be fitting. Would be very, very fitting.
Oh, shit. I don't think I called either of the last two games cracking. But yeah, this was a cracking game at Optus, and the Saturday afternoon game was a cracking game at the G, and we had a cracking game in Tasmania. Did I say the game in Tasmania was cracking? I don't know if I did there either.
I don't fucking remember.
But we had a cracking game at People First Stadium to open up Sunday.
The Coast Clash, but Dwayne Russell wasn't on the call. In fact, they got Hudson for it?
Yeah, but still, I mean, you had Andrews, Humphreys, and Walters. This game was made for Dwayne Russell.
Yeah.
The Gold Coast 17-10, 112. The West Coast 12-3, 75.
This was also an illiterate game.
No Reed.
Ethan or Harley. Ethan Reed has already, by the way, signed a 2-year extension with the Suns, who now have control of him through 2028. Is this some rare moment of culture development for
the mighty Sun?
I leave this game incredibly frustrated.
I wouldn't be, because here's the thing.
This is another one, though, where garbage time blew out a game that otherwise, for the better part of it, the full first half, as well as a lot of the third quarter, seemed very gettable without some ill discipline from West Coast, especially in the midfield, with Tim Kelly being uncharacteristically sloppy. Yes, there's a focus on a very high free kick count the Suns' way. It was 30-18. A lot of those were warranted, though. I'd say at least 4 or 5 of the 7 that Matt Rowell got were warranted.
Here's why I'm not frustrated from an Eagles perspective.
No Reed, no Barris?
No. It's just that even with that, the last 4 weeks, they've gone 2-2, and the 2 losses were much more watchable. I thought after the Bulldogs loss, it was, I don't know, do we have the GTA clip?
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
But, their losses have been competitive into the second half. We've moved past, I think, the worst case scenario Eagles. I think the lesser version of the Eagles is a game where you don't have a lot of support for Elliot Yeo, Tim Kelly, and Jake Waterman, and, Harley Reid. And even with that, they were competitive, and then just the Suns pulled away in the second half. And I think, the Suns clearly had more active contributors in this game. And I think we saw the model of what it could look like for the Suns down the road in terms of, Will Graham just tackles everybody
as if you needed another prime tackler.
Sam Clohessy controls the outside, and this was a quieter game for him, and he was still pretty good.
I think your rising star would probably go to Jake Rogers, 4 assists and getting out into space and putting on some pretty smart kicks, especially in the second half.
The way they entered the forward 50, I think, it's you can either have Rowell through the middle or Clohessy leading the way through the outside, and then you have Rogers kind of serve as the funnel. And I think it just proves that it's hard to judge a guy off a first game, because first games, and this is true in any sport, Like, the jitters can play a major factor, and the nerves and everything, and it's like, it's hard to evaluate a guy off of their very first game when they've got all the nerves. They might play the best game of their life, they might play the worst game of their life. Get him into more normal circumstances, and you can really start to evaluate. Also, Jared Witts destroyed Bailey Williams.
It had been a couple good weeks in a row after a shaky start for Bailey J. Williams, and he returned to coughing baby status against the hydrogen bomb that was Jared Witts. Not just because Witts just beat him as a pure hit the ball ruckman, but that Witts had the complete game as well, following up with tackles and clearances, enabling the best work with hits to advantage for the rest of the Suns midfield. It's a rare case when rucks not named Max Gawn get 2 or 3 votes. This is a game where I could see it happen.
I will say there were a couple of unexpected good Eagles contributors.
The first one I'm going to label is Harry Edwards in the defense, actually not looking terrible against Ben King for much of the afternoon. Yeah, King beat him a couple times late, but making up for Tom Barris is an incredibly difficult job. And Edwards, I thought, merited some future selection. He was easily the better of the two Edwards for the Eagles in this game. By the way, I would take Luke Edwards out and get Harvey Johnston in for a debut potentially for the Eagles.
Tom Cole, 12 intercept.
He's still functional, question mark.
His second half of the season. Liam Duggan.
After a slow start to the year where I thought at times he was one of the opposition's best players, this was his most in-tune game yet, continuing a positive trend from the Western Derby where he ended up actually sticking some marks and wasn't too daring in terms of his disposals. It was a more normal expected game for the Eagles in a lot of respects. I just still leave frustrated with the lack of discipline, more so than the final result. Did I expect the Suns to pull away? Yes. Did I expect the issues with just constant free kick issues? I did not expect that as much. Oh yeah, one other person that I'm going to mention in there that deserves to be in for the Eagles. Zane True, where is he again? And I'm not the only person to say this. He's been getting the ball in the twos and doing well enough to warrant this elevation. Again, last time we saw him, super sub round 23 last year in the win against the Dogs. Not seen at AFL level since. You're going to get Harley Reid back. You're going to get Tom Barris back. You're going to continue looking respectable, but there are still some clear changes that can be made elsewhere. Stop trying to make Luke Edwards happen and let Zane True and Harvey Johnston happen instead. If you're looking toward the future and you're trying to also figure out who warrants additional looks after this year in terms of contracts, then you need to give him, and then you need to give True in particular an opportunity.
Also, Jack Patricelli with an octopus.
Uneven game from him.
Still, if a forward's giving you an octopus, he's playing hard.
Forward, yes, but center bounce attendances were up for him in this game, and I like his burst that he can provide out of that. So there's some quality there for that.
Honestly, the reason I'm more optimistic about the Eagles and why I'm interested in watching them isn't because of the 2 games they've won. It's because of how they've looked in their last 2 losses. This was one of those games where it's like, this is what it looks like if the plan works for the Suns. Last week's mix of errors and immaturity is what it looks like when it doesn't come together.
And it also makes me even more surprised that Ethan Reed already got that extension when it was his immaturity and ill discipline that really stood out this past week. I'm glad the club is backing him in at least. I mean, you knew that they would with their academy group.
I loved also a quote from Damian Hardwick that he gave about the second quarter of this game. Let me find it real quick. Other than the aliens quote, it's the best quote of the year.
Yes. This is another thing I like about the Eagles from this game is that they did manage to punish Suns' mistakes. And in their past 4 games, really, they've been able to punish opposition mistakes. It's a matter now of limiting their own and be able to get the numbers back in response to their own issues.
So he said, I've got this stat called shit goal stat, and we gave them 3. I think we actually need to track this. It's a little too late to do it for this year, but I think the Saints would probably be one of the best in that category.
In giving up shit goals?
Yes.
Who would convert the most shit goals, though?
Might be the Cats right now. Hawthorne 5-12-42, defeated by Sydney 18-10, 118. Cracking game at the MCG.
Disappointing crowd for Buddy Day.
Yeah, this was like the Buddy Bowl.
And yes, Hawthorne are down. Yes,
I was shocked, though, that
I don't think they even cracked 40,000. I think it was in the 38s.
38052. That's actually really disappointing, especially considering Hawthorne actually turned out pretty well against North the week earlier. Sydney turns out well, but just the Hawks won one game and said like, all right, I'm out, because they played really poorly, just bad turnovers, bad free kicks allowed, bad everything. The play that really turned this game, there was a 12-point swing because Blake Hardwick had a goal wiped out with Mabi Orchel hitting Errol Golden, kind of like the upper chest area off the ball. And it looks like we just found out he's getting a 1-game suspension, which, maybe they'll use the good bloke thing and reduce it to a fine, but it became a 12-point swing because Joel Amartey had position on Sam Frost. We got some real Frost ball in this game.
By the way, it wasn't just that it was a 12-point turnaround. It was that the Swans also tacked on the next 4 goals after that too, and really cemented, there is going to be absolutely no fight back from Hawthorn that could change the outcome of this game whatsoever. Really, the interest from there for Hawthorn people was just seeing what Buddy's going to say, what the reaction is going to be for him. Glad that he was there, that the Hawthorn fans that did show got that moment to send him off. I love that it wasn't just him there doing the lap, but also he took around Jordan Lewis and Jordan Ruffhead's kids as well for that.
I'm disappointed that the players didn't all douse themselves in a gallon of oil as part of the tribute. That would have been appropriate. When Cats players and fans should do that when Hawkins retires as well. A couple years ago, baseball players doing the pine tar on the back of their jersey as a tribute to Alex Gordon.
Did non-Royals players do that even, I think?
Yeah, some that were just his former teammates, but a couple others as well. People like the dude. Anyway, Sydney had at one point 42 marks to 14, and it was not close. I think you could argue that the best 10 or 11 players on ground were all Swans.
And if one player were to break, it would be kind of continuing the baseball references here, Dylan Moore.
Yeah, Dylan Moore was pretty good. Even though he only kicked 1-1, he ended up with 8 score involvements, and when the team only had 17 scores.
17.
That's pretty good. I thought it was funny that Sam Mitchell said he felt the game was closer. And one team kicked 5-12 and the other kicked 18-10, but I still thought this was not a very close or competitive game, and even as the one taking our lead on notes for this game, I was kind of losing interest. I just didn't think the Hawks played very well. I thought James Warple was okay, I guess, and even he was a little too turnover prone, but if we look at players who you could consider better than any Hawthorn player in this game, I'm just going to go alphabetically. Nick Blakey, Ollie Florent, Errol Golden.
I always think Florent is smaller than he is by a few inches, and I never have been able to shake that. I saw Golden play deeper in both 50s a lot this game, and it worked out really well because it allowed Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner to have more open games in turn. Those are 2 more that you'll list here, probably.
Yeah,
Heaney's probably next up.
Will Hayward, then Isaac Heaney.
Yeah, Hayward definitely got some reward for a solid, good game and a solid month of April overall in the final quarter. I believe he kicked 2 goals in the last.
Jake Lloyd, all 4 Mutts, McCartan, McDonald, McInerney, McLean. I am just loving this season out of Justin McInerney so far. He ended up getting the victory cigar sub. He was so good on the outside and ended up with 7 score involvements, only 1 contested possession, but kicking at almost 90% efficiency. There's something about his game that I really like. It's not like he's a huge runner. He's just always there on the outside. 7 tackles, 4 assists. I thought Lewis Melican was quietly solid in the back. Probably not as good as, say, Dylan Moore. James Rowbottom.
100th game for him. I love.
Only 6 tackles, though?
Hey, that equals as many as Nick Blakey had entering the game. I sent you.
Yes, what was he had said?
This was in his little pregame message congratulating Rowbottom on his 100th and giving him his number 8 jumper for the game. He said,
"Together we've had 66 tackles this year. You've had 60, I've had 6.
Also, Chad Warner, who I think might have been best player overall, a goal, 8 tackles, 14 contested possessions, which was amazing considering how much he was into open space a lot of the time, 8 score involvements. And I thought Sam Wicks was really good, he seems to really just have the middle of the ground, especially in the forward 50 on lock, and is just involved in any sort of centering seat.
Warner and Wicks have really made strong use of the corridor in the past few weeks. And with Luke Parker about to come back, it's going to make list management very, very difficult there with Wicks having the game that he's had. What is the move there with Parker set to come back in probably for Sydney Derby 27 here?
Maybe demote James Jordan to sub and pop Braden Campbell. I thought Jordan had a pretty good game. It's just Campbell hasn't been bad by any stretch. I mean, Joel Amartey, I thought his presence was good even if he didn't have big numbers. Robbie Fox was a little quieter, right?
Returning more to a defensive job there, I think, especially since Wicks has been back in. That's been a case for Fox.
Maybe you just take Fox out. I don't know, but these are questions you want to have to answer.
And the Swans have often had these questions, and now they have more of them with veterans coming back in. Oh yeah, they're still doing this without Dane Rampy as well. Lewis Melkin really showed last year when Rampy was out, and he's doing it again right now.
Positives for Hawthorn. I thought Jack Scrimshaw was okay despite getting targeted a lot. Blake Hardwick was decent. I like Jai Newcomb, even if he didn't have his cleanest game. He's just, you want to have him on your team because he's willing to get in there and get dirty. Thought it was a bit of a step back for Connor Nash. Nice to have Will Day back. Unfortunately, Jai Sarong was pretty bad and got subbed out, and then Max Ramsden, who I really like, was no better. Big ups to Lloyd Meek for neutralizing Brody Grundy. I guess that might be the biggest positive out of this game is not only did Lloyd Meek continue his decent run, he made Brody Grundy not quite a non-factor, but way less noticeable. Neutralized it. They kind of played each other to a draw, an even up ball game.
And who is Lloyd Meek matching up against this week?
Tim English.
This could be fun. Legitimately fun. That's what I'm most looking forward to out of this Hawks-Dogs game coming up at Marvel.
Are we ready to go on to nominees? Is that it?
I think we are at this point.
I think that was a cracking round of footy.
And we're not done with the cracking moments yet.
Yeah, Mark of the Week is kind of obvious. It's Jamie Elliott. The other nominees, though, were Cam Guthrie spinning over Matthew Cottrell's shoulder and Mac Andrew over Jared Witz's shoulder.
The round 6 winner, by the way, was Harley Reid flying in back. A less common sort of Mark of the Week winner where it's less so about contact with another player and more so just the timing and the elevation. Elliott right now is your clubhouse leader for Mark of the Year, and I'd say by a wide margin potentially over Reid.
Both of these other two marks would have won some other weeks. I think I rank them Elliott, then Andrew, then Guthrie. And again, Andrew and Guthrie in most weeks would have had a shot, but not this week.
Those are like A or maybe at their lowest B+ marks in terms of like the Specky scale.
Yeah, the Elliott one is one that you show people that have never seen footy, and it's like, yeah, sometimes this happens. I just don't give people the impression that it happens all the time, but it is a thing that happens.
It's like how if I had to convince people with one play, it would be Liam Ryan's 2019 Mark of the Year against Max Gawn. And I do try that, and sometimes it works. Goal of the week, your round 6 winner was Cody Wakeman, picking up a spoil from his forward teammate Zane Cordy and taking a 2 bouncer while going toward the pocket. Your nominees for this round, on Thursday night in the losing effort, love that we had 2 games on Anzac Day and that we finally got one in Canberra on the day itself. Lincoln McCarthy got a nice snap around Jack Buckley after reading Joe Danaher's hit out. Then on Friday, Willie Rioli still got back up, humiliated Liam Stalker not once but twice.
Liam Stalker did not have a good game altogether.
Maybe he's one that you take out in order to bring Sinclair back to the back 6. That's one that we hadn't mentioned before. And then he also got around Isaiah Wanganeen-Millero, which doesn't happen all that often. Then on Saturday, Blake Akers, this was right near the end of the game, I think his second to last goal and Carlton's second to last then, getting through Brian Myers, Brandon Parfit, and Tom Atkins before finishing, kind of split Parfit and Atkins in the end. I really like the physicality of Akers' goal, but in terms of the actual selling of Candy, I'm going to give it to Willie Rioli Jr.
Yeah, I'm going to go Rioli, then Akers, and then McCarthy shouldn't have been included. Jeremy Cameron's similar goal was better.
Was that his second, number 600?
Yes, it was. It was like right off of a hit out. That's my one complaint here. Yeah, it was one of the many calls that, of course, didn't happen according to Carlton fans, but Hawkins got held by Mark Pitnet on a ball up and still got it to Cameron, who just kicked his 600th right out of that. So that was the one that I think was third best over McCarthy. But yeah, Rioli and Akers were the best 2, and Rioli was the best of those.
Here's a fascinating stat for you. Geelong are the only AFL club this year through round 7 to not have a single player record 30 disposals in a game.
But look at how many guys each week are getting like in the 15 to 20 range. It's Dangerfield might have gotten to 30 the way he was playing this game.
Pretty even across the board here, looking at this table that user 17142857 posted on the AFL subreddit, just with how even the
disposal output has been from the Cats. And North fan also pointed out this is also helped by the fact that your key forwards, particularly Jessa, aren't afraid to move up the ground and get the ball themselves. I love how even this is, and it does make the voting for us and others reasonably more difficult.
Main character for this week was also difficult to decide. Actually, I don't think it was. Our round 6 main character, remember, was the fly on Matthew Knicks's head.
Is this as fascinating to you as the fly on Mike Pence's hair?
I think it's way more fascinating.
Because it's a bald guy?
And it's a big fucking fly.
I mean, it's Australia. Of course it's big and weird.
But I was correct. The main character of round 7 is indeed Dunga.
Sorry, now.
I mean, nothing in the pregame stuff that was that interesting. I'm disappointed that Buddy's dad, would have been a good candidate. I say this in the most positive way possible. That dude looks like the human version of Cthulhu. It's entirely because of the beard, and that is not a negative. I'd say that as a very positive thing. I think this dude is such a badass. He should be on the list of badass sports dads with Marcus Stroman, Josh Bell, and Jake Smolinski's dads.
I think people might know about Stroman's dad, maybe Bell's, not Smolinski's. Mike Smolinski is legitimately swole.
He looks like he was in Roadhouse. Well, if you Google Jake Smolinski, goes Jake Smolinski net worth, Jake Smolinski wife, Jake Smolinski dad.
Okay, so actual main character this round, Jeremy Cameron for the 5 goals and his 600. Darcy Jones' helmet.
I think it was a game with 87,000 in attendance.
The Anzac Spirit.
I think it's got to be Jeremy Cameron. And I'm not just saying that to be biased. I try to be unbiased. But also, when you're the team that's now 7-0, and you're kind of the star of a win of the top of the ladder game, I think it kind of has to be him, doesn't it? I mean, love Darcy Jones and love that he signed a guy's forehead after. He signed a kid's forehead, and I do want to give some credit. But Darcy Jones and his post-game autograph session was awesome, and the team really likes him with the light, how much they gave him the Gatorade bath after.
I also just like the Footy tradition of signing weird things.
I mean, that's been a thing in other sports, I'm thinking, who was it?
Okay, but somebody signing an avocado at a training session, just weird food items I remember being a thing in particular.
People sent potatoes to basketball players in the mail a few years ago.
Soon enough, somebody's just going to sign a honeydew melon before somebody eats out of it.
Or cantaloupes are so much better. Honeydew is just a watered down cantaloupe.
Or rock melon, I guess, for some Australians. What is the divide, actually? I'm going to leave on this because I actually don't know. What is the divide between where in Australia you call it cantaloupe and where you call it rock melon?
I like that name. It actually makes sense. Unlike some of the other, calling arugula rocket or eggplant aubergine.
Rock melon actually makes sense, and I want to know which states have that name more prominent than others.
It's like how in Brazil, it's a whole thing over, do you call cookies biscoito or bolacha?
No, instead, it's rock melon versus cantaloupe?
Yes.
Still not as intense a debate as which West African country makes the better jollof rice.
Oh, I like your accent. Where you from?
I'm Liberian.
Oh, my bad. I like your accent. Where you from?
Follow Ethan at Castle Media. Follow me at BenjaminHK01. Follow us collectively at Americans Footy on Twitter as well as Instagram and YouTube. Follow Brian Harambe, who is in his very much do not disturb me, I actually want to sleep mode at Cat Named Brian exclusively on Instagram. We'll be back at it again for round 8 pretty soon. Rivalry round in general, and also an actual proper Sunday night finish with a matchup that actually deserves that time slot.